This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and are live and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. If you'd like to give us a call toll-free worldwide, 800-610-7035, and the studio extension is 0. You can always listen to the X-Zone 724-365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. You can listen to the X-Zone radio show via telephone by calling 213-401-0080 and on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. X-Zone Nation, my guest this hour is Janice CARLSON. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Communications and Secondary Education. After years spent as an advertising copywriter, she authored 15 novels for New York publishing houses under her fiction writing pen name, Ashland Price. Then in 1992, Janice accidentally discovered her ability to communicate with the dead. Since that time, she has done thousands of afterlife communication sessions for clients throughout the United States with, listen to this, this is a first. Well, it's not a first because I told you, the X-Zone Nation, about this last time Janice was on our show. She offers a money-back guarantee of contact. 3,800 some odd guests that we've had on the show. This lady is the only one that has ever given a money-back guarantee of contact. Her recent book, Soul Sensing, How to Communicate with Your Dead Loved Ones, received a glowing 4-star review from the San Francisco Book Review, as well as raves from scores of radio and podcast hosts throughout America. Her website, JaniceCarlson.com. And Janice, welcome back to the X-Zone.
Thanks for having me back, Rob.
It's great talking to you, and I love the fact that you offer a money-back guarantee. Tell me, has anyone ever claimed the money-back guarantee?
Yeah, I mean, there have been times when my client and I just feel like I'm not talking to the party they wanted to contact, and that's fine by me. I mean, that's totally okay, because that's what you're paying for, is to talk to the party you're looking for on the other side. It doesn't happen very often. I mean, I'd say maybe 1 in 50 people that might happen to, maybe 2 in 100 then. So it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, then we just have to assume that either that spirit is just not available to talk, maybe they've reincarnated, or I'm just not the right medium for them.
Wow. When somebody contacts you to communicate with their loved one on the other side, how do you connect with the spirit world? How does the spirit world know that Janice CARLSON is looking for a specific spirit? Like, do you have call forwarding?
Yeah, I'm not sure how it happens. I just know that it does. Certainly the party that wants to contact a deceased loved one or pet is sending out vibes ahead of time for the spirit to talk with us. And because I do all of my appointments by appointment only, there could be some truth to the fact that the spirits have some notice about it and make themselves available, rather than it being sort of an impromptu drop-in kind of thing.
When you communicate with the other side, how do you get their responses? Is it a voice in your ear? Is it a message that you get in your mind's eye? What is the communication like?
Well, the mind's eye thing is what I often get as images. Sometimes there'll be auditory things as well. I may hear a name. I may hear a word that is significant. And I also use my chakras a lot, which is something I talk about at length in my book, is using your chakras for afterlife communications. And often, a session will start with me feeling something in my throat chakra or in my heart chakra that tells me how the spirit died.
Let's go back to, when was it, 1992, when you accidentally discovered your ability to communicate with the dead. How did that happen?
Well, I had hired a woman to do some freelance advertising for my novels, and when I went to her home, she was doing this business in her home, and when I went to her home, I said, I knew the previous owner of this townhouse, and you've really done a beautiful job of making it your own and, changing it into kind of a U.S. Southwest kind of look. And she said, I love this place, but I wish the previous owner had told me it was haunted. And I was really stunned by that because I knew the previous owner really well, and I'd been up to the house on several occasions, and no mention of the place being haunted was ever made, ever. And so I said, I don't know how I know this, but I don't think you're being haunted. And as we walked into her living room, I was mesmerized by a picture of a woman on her piano. It was, one of those stand-up photograph things, framed photographs. And I said, I don't know how I know this, but I'm feeling like that is who is contacting you in this house. And she said, well, that's my mother. She died 8 years ago in a horseback riding accident. And we never had a chance to say goodbye. And
oh my gosh!
And I said, well, I'm starting to get messages from her in my head, and I hope you don't think I'm crazy, but I'm just going to tell you what she's saying to me. And that's when I realized something was going on that I had never explored before. This was before I'd ever seen anybody like Sylvia Browne or James Van Prague or any of those people on TV, so I didn't know how to place this episode, this thing that was happening to me. I mean, the only thing I could come close with was maybe having seen gypsy seances in movies or something. But those are always done, it seems, around a table with a group of people in the dark. And this was broad daylight, and it didn't have any kind of spooky feel to it at all.
When you're out shopping with your family, or if you're in a restaurant, or let's say you're at a busy airport or train station, do you get messages from the other side because someone that they have a message for is in your vicinity and they think that you'll just go over there and tap them on the shoulder and say, you're not going to believe this, but I've got a message from you from your Aunt Esmeralda who died 10 years ago. Has that ever happened?
It has happened. I usually have to have more contact than them being across a room. It'd be more likely to be someone I'm actually very close to in proximity, like a waitress or a waiter or someone, maybe checking out groceries for me, cashier.
Or in an airplane, the person in the seat beside you, I guess?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. They'd have to be that close, probably, for that to happen. And if I'm alone, I will sometimes tell them what I'm getting. If I'm with my husband or another family member, I usually don't say anything because they get embarrassed. So,
speaking about your husband, all right, that opens up a question that I've always wanted to ask someone like yourself who, not that long ago, discovered that you've got the ability to communicate with the dead. What does your husband think about your newfound profession or your newfound gift?
He, because it happened in the way that it happened, where it was happening for a woman who never got a chance to say goodbye to her mother, and because it was a very tearful spiritual kind of experience
Right.
that I was relaying to him after it happened. He's never been too judgmental about it. He said, I was wondering why you were running so late, and I told him. And he said, well, it sounds to me like you had something important to do there.
Wow.
So, you know, he has sat in on some group sessions and things. He's seen me do it a few times, and he gets it. He understands it. But sometimes, back in '92 and stuff, when it first happened, he'd tease me about it once in a while and kind of form his fingers into a cross and kind of push them my way, you know, to say, how weird is this? And I think it's because people just weren't talking about it much back then.
So, after all these years, is your husband a believer now?
Yes.
Has he ever asked you to communicate with someone on the other side for him?
Yes. And for instance, I didn't know much about the planning of his mother's wedding, funeral. But when we got home from the funeral and we were alone, I was able to tell him that his mother thanked him for the music and various parts of the service that I didn't realize he'd planned.
Wow.
And sometimes I'll know when he's visited her grave. On the way home from work or something like that. I'll know things that have happened.
But by the way, do you know what the difference between an Irish wedding and an Irish wake is?
I don't.
One less drunk.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, you've got to be Irish to really appreciate that joke. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. I'm Scandinavian, so maybe I don't totally get it, but
okay. You see, when we the Irish have a wake, it's a party. We celebrate the person's life, and we usually get very tipsy doing it. So the difference between an Irish wedding, where you also get very tipsy, and an Irish wake, where you're celebrating the life of a person that has passed away, is one less drunk.
There you go.
Okay.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, it did to me, too, until he kind of shot me down with that one.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I still love you.
Yeah.
Tell me about your book, Soul Sensing. How did that come about?
Well, I felt that people that I was talking to and doing medium sessions for had so many experiences with seeing signs of visitation from their dead loved ones that I wanted to write about that and how important it is not to miss those signs of visitation, not to miss the fact that your dead loved one wants to affirm for you that their spirit is not dead and that they continue to watch how things are going in your day-to-day life. They continue to be part of our day-to-day lives.
Wow. How long did it take you to write the book, or did it kind of flow very naturally as if you had help from the other side writing it?
Well, it took me a while. I'd say had I been working on it full time, it would have taken about 3 years. But I was doing other kinds of writing, like advertising and stuff throughout. So it took me about 6 years, and which sounds like a really long time, but part-time it's not too bad, I guess. And it did. There were times when I felt that it was very channeled for me, and other times when it was a little harder to. When you do something as reflexively as medium work, and mediums do it rather reflexively and aren't even sure how it happens, it's hard to break it down and explain how to do it and the different routes to doing it.
Let me ask you this. What was it like the very first time that you sat down with someone who had come to see you about communicating with a loved one on the other side? How did you feel, especially when that contact was made?
I was really relieved when the contact was made, because after I'd had that first experience that showed me I was a medium, I thought, will this ever happen again? Or was this just a passing thing that happened because of this woman's relationship with her mother and her need to speak with her mother at that point in her life? So I was very relieved when I was able to do it again.
Fascinating. Maybe you can, for our audience, tell them the difference between having a psychic session or a psychic reading is and what a medium session entails.
A psychic session will be a situation where the reader is telling you about your present, perhaps trying to tune into you and tell you some things about yourself that they couldn't possibly know, and then moving into future events, telling you what, say, the next 6 months will look like for you, and what the next 12 months will look like for you, and doing a Q&A, question and answer kind of thing. So it feels a little bit like having your chart done by an astrologer. And a medium session is where you're talking through a medium to a deceased loved one or pet.
So a psychic can't talk to a dead person or a spirit?
No. The rule of thumb is all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. So mediums tend to be very strong psychics as well. And I didn't realize that. Again, I didn't realize that I was psychic until after I realized I was a medium. So many of us are walking around with psychic abilities that we haven't developed or tested and don't even know are there.
In all the medium sessions that you've done, has there ever been a time when you've actually contacted a spirit that was from the dark side?
I've certainly felt dark energy when I've gone to various haunted houses and things like that. I'm not a ghost hunter, but yes, I've certainly felt that energy. But there is one reading that I did, and I wouldn't say that this particular party was in hell, but I'm really hard-pressed to say where he was. It was for a client. She told me ahead of time that it was her grandfather and that he was a horrible man, but she didn't go into details. And all I could see for him was that he was in a dark place. It was wet and cold, and it was almost like seeing a cross section of the ground, seeing him in his grave in this crumbling wooden casket with mud and worms and cold and wet all around him. It was almost as though he was trapped in that place. And I didn't quite know what to make of that. It certainly didn't look like hell, per se, that in any way that I'd ever thought of hell. But it looked like a pretty bad fate, though.
What has been your most awe-inspiring reading that you've ever done or session that you've done? The one that has touched you more than any other session did. I mean, without giving us any confidentiality argument that you may have.
It was at a group reading that I did. I often do them around Halloween and stuff because it's popular at that time of year. And it was a woman who had lost her daughter to disease, and who'd had she'd had to have several surgeries and died on the operating table, and it was extremely touching and moving. The connection that I felt between her and her daughter was just humbling, and it was amazing, all the information that daughter was able to bring through. It was the first time that, since her daughter had died years before, that she'd had, any opportunity to really talk to her.
My gosh. It must be hard for you to have a medium session where the person requesting the session is trying to communicate with a child. I know that I would find that the hardest thing to do. Yes,
and losing a child is just the worst. And medium sessions really help with healing that. And a lot of psychologists are referring, and grief counselors are referring people to their clients now to mediums to have just at least one session where you make connections and kind of have a chance to say goodbyes or to reconnect too, and start to learn some ways. Always when I do a session, I'll talk about ways to connect with that deceased loved one, so you can continue to stay in touch with them.
What do people do when they're dead and they're on the other side? What have they told you that they do?
different from the earth in some ways and very similar in others. But one of the things that I've found in talking to them is that creativity is highly prized on the other side, in heaven specifically is what I call it. And creativity is highly prized, and so I find that a lot of them are engaged in creative arts, whether it's singing with a choir of angels, whether it's painting, drawing, cooking, baking, bakery, decorating. I mean, you name it. That creativity is there, and it's even stronger there. So there's a lot of that. They also play a lot, and that's sort of an interesting thing because your right lobe is the creative, playful lobe, and it's the thing that you kind of lose as you age and you become more left-brained. And so there's a chapter in my book about left brain and right brain and why some people have so much trouble getting into being able to do psychic and medium work because they're very math brain oriented. They're very that sense of play and creativity has left them that they had as children. So that's one thing that I really talk to people about doing is getting into some creative thing, whether it's scrapbooking or whatever it might be. On the other hand, there's a great number of people who talk about learning about the universe and having an intense interest in numbers and sacred math and extraterrestrials and learning about other galaxies and all sorts of science as well.
If they're able to learn all of this wonderful information on the other side, why can't they give us information on this side to help us make this a better world?
Well, I think that they do. I think that they do channel information to us, and it's just our choice to decide whether we think we're imagining it, whether we think it's actionable information that we're getting, and that sort of thing. But I do think that they do convey an awful lot of information to us. I hear people tell me once in a while that, especially as they get into their 50s and beyond, they'll hear a voice in their head, maybe it's their deceased mom or somebody that says, be nice. Be nice. Especially if they're having one of those days where they're being nasty to a clerk or taking out a bad day on a coworker. And they'll just hear this little piece of advice. It's about love. And that kind of thing. And I think that's an interesting thing. If you know it's not coming from you, it's kind of something you might want to listen to for your own good, I think.
But how do we know if this is really someone from the other side who is trying to communicate with us and give us that guidance that we need at that moment, instead of our own mind going back into the hard drive of our mind and memories and pulling this information out at a time that the mind believes we can use it?
Well, certainly there's some of that, but I tell people to really pay attention to your chakras. If you feel a message comes to you and there's a chill around your shoulders or around your throat chakra, if you're feeling something in one of your chakras, that's usually the dead talking to you. That's the spirit world talking to you, because our chakras resonate at a much higher rate than the rest of our bodies do. They are the portals of the soul.
But when people don't know about chakras, how can they validate what they believe they might be hearing?
There are other ways. You'll have a sense that it's not coming from you. You'll have a sense that it's coming from out of the blue. And that's another thing to pay attention to. And especially if you hear this little voice and then something happens that makes you realize that was somebody trying to help me. That was somebody trying to tell me not to take that route home tonight because there was an accident on that route or there was danger if I did thus and so. So that you begin to realize that someone's trying to guide you too.
Stand by, Janice. You and I have to take a short break. We'll be back shortly. Exonation, Janice CARLSON is my guest this hour. She's the author of Soul Sensing, How to Communicate with Your Dead Loved Ones. She's also a medium, psychic, and author. Her website, www.janicecarlson.com. And don't forget, she offers a money-back guarantee if she doesn't make contact. We'll be back on the other side as we continue investigating the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and around the world on the Starcom Radio Network. Don't go away.
Back in Victorian England, a famous theologian posed a perplexing riddle. Why are the two top personalities in the Bible tagged with the numbers 7 and 11? Academics agree the answer is found in the stunning discovery of a hitherto secret Bible structure explained in a new book called The Genesis Grid. The discovery is so simple that preschool children could illustrate it. Certain claims are hugely controversial and may offend some, but at the X Zone, we've studied this awesome new book and agree with one expert, and I quote, "These discoveries appear to be beyond coincidence." So who or what hid this wonderful pattern in the Bible, and what might they do next? Find out more, X Zone Nation, and read reviews on www.genesisgrid.co.uk. That's www.genesisgrid.co.uk.
In the world today, most people want what is called the American dream. They want love, a family, a fancy car, and a nice home in a nice neighborhood. They also want a good job and money to travel to interesting places. Life is great because they have the American dream. But what happens to this dream if they hear they have a devastating illness like lung cancer? The doctor may tell them they need treatment immediately or they will be dead in 6 months. He tells them, you need surgery, and then you need chemotherapy to get better. When they get home, they think of many unanswered questions. They ask themselves, will I survive when so many of my friends with cancer have died? How will I deal with the pain, hair loss, nausea and vomiting, sore mouth, and other side effects of chemotherapy and pain of surgery? Will I be able to keep on working? What will happen to my family? Then they look at the internet and wonder, is there a better way to deal with lung cancer and return to my American dream? Carl Helvey can tell you yes, there is a better way. Carl Helvey is a registered nurse with a doctorate in public health and a 38-year lung cancer survivor. Carl was given 6 months to live when diagnosed, and he refused chemotherapy and surgery. Carl used alternative interventions. Those not only helped him overcome lung cancer, but also to remain cancer-free and healthy for over the past 36 years since recovery. In his book, You Can Beat Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions, Dr. Helvey will tell you his story of using all-natural treatments for lung cancer and continuing to work during his treatment. Free of pain and discomfort, Carl will also share how he remained cancer and disease-free since then without chronic illnesses or prescribed medications. His story is supplemented with chapters by Dr. Bernie Siegel, Dr. Francesco Contreras, and Dr. James Forsyth, alternative integrative physicians, and Dr. Kim Dalzell and Tanya Harder-Pierce, health professionals. All have successfully helped others overcome cancer. Research presented by the alternative physicians on their treatments for lung cancer demonstrate a significantly higher long-term survival rate for lung cancer clients than those obtained by conventional doctors. In addition, their clients were free of or had reduced side effects. You Can Beat Lung Cancer Using Alternative Integrative Interventions by Dr. Carl Helvey is now available at all major book outlets and at www.beatlungcancer.net. That's www.beatlungcancer.net. This information may help you return to the American dream. Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told.
As this is the first book in the esoteric series, modern esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com.
I'm Rob McConnell, and welcome to the X Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Today on the X Zone, contacting the dead by phone. Can you contact the dead by phone? Thomas Edison kept his machine secret until they were patented, so little is known about what he may have planned but never completed. However, in 1941, a blueprint was found in New York for a telephone to contact the dead, and this was allegedly to have been Edison's plan. It may have well been a fraud. However, in any case, a model was made from the design, but unfortunately, it didn't work. Contacting the dead, fact or fiction, the quest continues in the X Zone.
Hi, this is Ken Elliott. When I'm floating around the universe, I always try to tune in to Rob McConnell.
Hi, ho there, Trinity Frog on Sesame Street. When I want to find out what's going on with UFOs or ghosts, I listen to the X Zone with Rob McConnell.
This is Les Corrigan from Target Internet Development. You're listening to Rob McConnell on the X Zone Radio Show.
This is John Hogue, prophecy scholar, and you're listening to Rob McConnell in the X Zone.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back, everyone. Janice Carlson is my guest for this hour, www.janicecarlson.com. She is a medium, psychic, and the author of Soul Sensing, How to Communicate with Your Dead Loved Ones. And once again, her website is janicecarlson.com, and she offers a money-back guarantee of contact. Janice, thanks very much for joining us. Great pleasure talking to you. What have you been told by the other side and those that you've communicated with? What happens to us when we die?
Well, it doesn't vary a whole lot. Most of them talk about going down a long tunnel and going to a place of light and seeing relatives and past friends and past pets. And for most people, it's quite an exhilarating experience and comforting too. So it doesn't vary much from that perspective. But some people who have a long period before they die, when they're ill and that kind of thing, will even start to see deceased loved ones before they actually pass. So I think that's a way of calming them down to help them make the transition to the next world.
Does it matter what religious philosophy they have followed on this side when they get to the other side, or is everyone the same?
It doesn't seem to matter. It seems pretty much a universal experience.
What do they wear over there? What do they eat over there?
Whatever they want. They often dress the way they did here on Earth. Some who were into fashion design and that kind of thing may create a whole wardrobe for themselves and others. It's a lot like I guess the best way to describe it would be maybe the holodeck on Star Trek or something, because we're talking about the world of spirit, which is like subatomic matter. So it's not the same as the physical world, but it certainly seems like a physical world to them.
Do they eat?
And as far as what they eat,
yeah,
I think you asked what they eat. Well, they don't eat for nutrition. They don't eat for energy. They eat for taste. It appears to be purely a pleasurable type of activity, and there are many really fine cooks in heaven too. That's their art. That's their creativity, and so they enjoy cooking. and baking and creating things for their fellow people in heaven.
Can the dead predict the future?
Yes, they can. I didn't realize that until around 2006 when I was reading for, and people can find this on my website, it's called Predictions is the tab, and then you go into it, it's called Peter's Predictions. And Peter was an artist from the Twin Cities area where I live, and he died of a sudden heart attack in 2005, and we were noticing his widow and I she wanted frequent sessions, and so we noticed that he was starting to talk about things that didn't have anything to do with her life or what he'd seen her doing in the past couple weeks or their daughters, and he'd just predict things and then they'd come true. And for instance, the first time he did it, he said some harm may befall the Pope, and 7 hours later, the Pope was I think it was Pope Benedict at the time, was nearly assailed by someone in a crowd in Rome who was grabbed right away, and so nothing happened to him. But it was just kind of a weird coincidence, we thought, and then things kept happening like that, these kinds of predictions. His manifestation rate of how often, like when they'd come true, was about every 21 days after on average about 21 days after he'd make a prediction. For instance, when the thing happened with the oil rig in Louisiana and the Gulf there, he predicted about 6 weeks before, I think it was about 6 weeks before, he said a tower will fall. And then he talked about a great natural disaster. And there were some other things about it, that prediction that just told us that's what he was talking about. The thing that's kind of frustrating about it is that often you can't get enough information about it to prevent it happening. I mean, you have to know precisely when and where to prevent it happening. So it can get to be a little bit like the Mothman in that, these predictions are made, but you don't necessarily know how to prevent these things. And of course, not everything he predicted was dire either. Some of it was just telling his family, when you go to this neighborhood picnic, be sure you don't eat the potato salad. And then, so they didn't, and everyone else did, and they didn't get sick.
Is there a common thread when it comes to the questions that your clients want to ask the other side?
Well, often they just want to know, what is my mother's life not like now? How is my dog doing? Is he adjusting to this? Does he understand why I had to have him put down and so forth? And so they just want to be assured, I think, more than anything else, that that their loved one is okay and adjusting to life on the other side, and that type of thing. That's mainly what they want to discuss. And so I'll tell them what their loved one is engaged in, what kind of clothing they're wearing, that sort of thing, so they get a sense of. Often a loved one will say, I'm having chocolate milk or something like that, and that'll have been one of their favorite foods on earth.
So people actually ask you to communicate with their dogs, their cats, their pets?
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. 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 I mean, they're family members, and, because we have to take so much responsibility in the deaths of these family members, we have to make the decision often to put them down. It's particularly harrowing for people to lose a pet.
I can understand that, but how do you get the information from the dog or the cat? Like, they're different species.
Yeah, there are different species, but I feel that, first of all, I think there's probably a little spirit guide intervention there that helps translate their answers into what I'd know as English. I get a lot of images from animals, and sometimes the images are even kind of embarrassing for the owner. I mean, yeah, I was talking to a parakeet who had passed on the other side, and I said, this is really peculiar, but he says that he would eat out of your cereal bowl in the morning. I see him hopping around, and eating cereal out of your cereal bowl in the morning. And they'd have to confess, yeah, I let my bird do that. Yeah, I did. So, I mean, some of it's kind of embarrassing, I guess, but it's, the lives we live with these pets.
Do you ever contact someone on the other side who has been reincarnated again? And how can you contact a spirit who's been reincarnated? Like, how does that work?
You can't. You don't get much. I mean, I may get information about what they were like on Earth the first time around or the last time they were here, but basically there's not that sense of them moving forward or being able to tell me much about their life in heaven. And there may even be a sense of yearning on their part to come back to the Earth, a sense of this energy that they left behind that said that they were not satisfied with how their life went and would like to come back and have a do-over.
So it seems that the other side is totally different from the way that many of us were taught it was like they don't sit on clouds, play harps all day. They don't walk on sidewalks of gold. They don't wear white robes. And, so what is a person supposed to believe? Are angels real, or are they just a made-up figment for our imaginations to better try and understand what we don't understand about death?
Well, angels are a different subject than our deceased loved ones and pets. There's a difference between a spirit and an angel. And often the angels, when you get into that grouping in heaven, is a more evolved being. And maybe they always wear white. Who knows? I mean, it's hard to say. But when you're talking to a human spirit, they're often going to convey human behavior in their choice of clothing and so forth.
I'm still having a bit of a time wrapping my head around you communicating with dead animals on the other side. Wow. Is there anything that cannot be communicated with on the other side? Anything. So is it anything that has been alive in a physical form on this side that can be communicated with on the other side?
Yeah, in theory, yeah.
In theory?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I haven't seen too many exceptions of that. If it was alive and it had a soul, yeah.
Even fish?
Well, I can't say that I've communicated with anybody's fish. So I don't know. Maybe fish are not part of that.
So let's say somebody listening tonight wants to try and communicate with someone that they've loved who's departed and is now on the other side. Is there anything that you can share with them that would give them that ability, even if it's just a little touch, a whisper in the ear, or that fragrance that of Grandpa's pipe that he used to have when he was on this side? How can people try to make that communication?
Well, that's, what my book Soul Sensing really covers. And, they can get it on Amazon or what have you. But, it's a series of different ways of trying to communicate with the other side. I certainly would advocate use of a pendulum to start with. And, you want to check to make sure you're using the pendulum correctly. But you can certainly get yes-no answers from a deceased loved one starting out that way. The book then moves on to other methods, using your chakras. Becoming familiar with your chakras is a really important thing to do, because that, again, is often where spirits communicate with us.
How about a Ouija board?
I just have never advocated Ouija boards, in part because the manufacturer calls it a game. A game, a board game, not a means of communication. And it's also because when we die, we become subatomic matter, which moves very quickly compared to physical matter. And and spirits do move and resonate very quickly, and so you for instance, can get several impressions from them at once, several images that I then have to sort out and figure out what they're talking about. And because of this kind of way that they resonate in the energy, the high energy that most of them have, I would just think that a Ouija board would be so tedious. Trying to spell out names with one letter at a time would just be so tedious for the dead. I mean, it does have a yes-no place that you can go, but it's just not very fast. And I guess I've always felt that something that can imbue several images at once, like tarot cards, is probably a better choice for communication, in-depth communication.
So, at the end of the day, how does someone know who is so torn, who is so forlorn, who is so sad that somebody that they have loved so much has actually gone to the other side, that they want to communicate with them? How do they know who the charlatans are in this business and who the credible mediums are?
Well, I think a money-back guarantee is a nice thing when it's made available, because if you're really not feeling like you're getting the answers that resonate with you about that deceased loved one. Again, the deceased loved one may not say exactly what you're expecting them to say, but during a session, if what they do say is accurate, keep going with it. You know, for instance, I might not be able to predict what even a living person is going to say, you know, what my husband might say when he comes in the door at night. And so being able to predict that is not what you're looking for. Having some set of information that you have to have conveyed during a session, that's a bad way to go into it. It's just better to let the deceased loved one choose what they want to say, and then decide, is this accurate or not accurate for them.
Is there a difference between a spirit and a ghost? Like, what happens if my dearly departed turns into a ghost and not a spirit? Can they still be contacted?
Yes. A spirit is what they prefer to be called. A ghost has connotations of, especially in the metaphysical world, of being someone that lingers in a setting, and often unwanted, you know, and engages in a behavior we call haunting, which tends to be negative in nature. So there's really a difference between hauntings and visitations.
Janice, our time is up for tonight. I do want to thank you for joining us. And Exonation...
Well, thanks for having me back on.
It's my pleasure. And Exonation, if you'd like to contact Janice for either a medium session or a psychic session, or if you'd like to buy a copy of her book, Soul Sensing, How to Communicate with Your Dead Loved Ones, visit her online at www.janicecarlson.com. That's janicecarlson.com. I'll be back on the other side of this short break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I've got to tell you something. Communicating with your dog, your cat, your bird. I wonder, you know what, I should have asked her if she's ever communicated with a dinosaur. Or a caveman, for that matter. Are you a skeptic or a believer? Send me an email on air at xzoneradiotv.com. Major Doug Rocky is my guest on the other side of this break. We're going to be talking about depleted uranium, and as a member of the military, how he feels when people are saying on air that ISIS was formed by the United States, Israel, and Saudis, and that the U.S. military is one of the two largest narcotic traffickers in the world. We'll be back on the other side. Don't go away.